knew me as us. When I found the Airbnb listing, it felt perfect. A charming little house on the outskirts of a quiet town, surrounded by hills and woods. It was a place where I could breathe, reset, and be alone. The host, Carla, was lovely. Her profile picture showed a warm, smiling woman in her 50s, and her message after my booking was equally inviting. Welcome, Lily. The house is all yours for the week. Let me know if you need anything. The place itself was cozy, a 2-bedroom home with rustic decor, a small garden, and a wraparound porch that overlooked a forest. The best part, though, was the large front window in the living room. It stretched nearly from floor to ceiling, offering a perfect view of the woods. The first day passed peacefully. I unpacked, made tea, and spent the evening curled up on the couch with a book. The silence was refreshing, broken only by the occasional chirp of crickets. For the first time in months, I felt at ease. But by the second night, something shifted. It started with the knocking. I was in the kitchen, washing dishes, when I heard it. A soft, deliberate knock at the front door. I froze, my hands still in the soapy water. The house was isolated, and Carla hadn't mentioned anyone nearby. Cautiously, I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. The porch light cast a dim glow, illuminating nothing. The porch was empty. I opened the door a crack, half expecting to see a stray animal darting away. But there was no one there, just the night, quiet and still. I told myself it was my imagination, maybe the wind brushing against the wooden frame, and locked the door. The next night, it happened again. This time, it was louder. 3 sharp knocks that echoed through the living room. My chest tightened as I crept toward the door, my bare feet silent on the wooden floor. I looked through the peephole, but again, no one was there. I stepped back, the hair on my arm standing on end. Then I heard it, the faint sound of breathing. It wasn't coming from the porch. It was coming from inside the house. I spun around, my eyes darting to the shadows pooling in the corners of the room. The breath caught in my throat, and I grabbed my phone, turning on the flashlight. I searched every room, every closet, every space where someone, or something, could hide. Nothing. By now, my nerves were frayed. I considered calling Carla, or even packing up and leaving, but I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid. This was why I'd come here after all, to confront my fears and find peace. But peace never came. The knocking became a nightly ritual, always at the same time, 1:13 a.m., and it wasn't just the door. Sometimes, I'd hear it on the windows, gentle taps, as if someone were running their fingers along the glass. And then, there were the footsteps. Late one night, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling when I heard them. Soft, deliberate steps pacing outside the house. I stayed perfectly still, my breath shallow, as they circled the perimeter. When I finally summoned the courage to peek out the window, there was no one there. Just the trees, their branches swaying in the faint breeze. But the worst came on my final night. I had barely slept all week, and the stress had worn me down. At exactly 1:13, the knocks came again. This time, they were furious, pounding against the door, as if whoever, or whatever, was out there was desperate to get in. My heart raced as I approached the door. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. I leaned toward the peephole and froze. There was an eye staring back at me. I stumbled backward, my hands shaking as I grabbed my phone and dialed Carla. It rang twice before she picked up, her voice groggy. "Carla," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Someone's at the door. They're looking through the peephole." There was a long pause on the other end. "Lily," she said slowly, Are you sure it's the peephole? What do you mean? I hissed. She hesitated. That house doesn't have one. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. I turned back to the door, dread pooling in my stomach. The peephole was gone. The smooth wood stared back at me, unbroken. I left that night, abandoning half my belongings in my rush to get out. Carla offered to come check on the house, but I told her not to bother. I didn't want anyone else going through what I had. To this day, I don't know what I saw or what saw me. But sometimes, late at night, I still feel the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting, just beyond the glass. I arrived at the Airbnb just as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in streaks of orange and violet. The house was nestled at the edge of a dense forest, its tall trees casting long shadows over the driveway. It was quiet, almost unnaturally so, but I welcomed the solitude. A night alone in this cozy cottage was exactly what I needed to unwind. The inside was just as charming as the photos had promised. Warm, minimal, and clean. A small living room, a kitchenette, and a single bedroom. The large windows offered a view of the forest. Though as darkness fell, they became black mirrors reflecting the warm glow of the lamps. After unpacking, I made myself a quick dinner, poured a glass of wine, and settled on the couch. The silence, which had initially been comforting, began to feel oppressive as the hours ticked by. Every creak of the house seemed louder, every whisper of the wind against the windows more insistent. At around 11 p.m., I decided to head to bed. As I brushed my teeth in the small bathroom, I felt it, the first prickle of unease. It started as a vague sensation, like the weight of someone's gaze on the back of my neck. I glanced at the small frosted window above the sink. Nothing. Still, the feeling lingered. I shook it off, climbed into bed, and scrolled through my phone for a while before turning off the lamp. The room plunged into darkness, save for the faint light of the moon filtering through the curtains. That's when I heard it. A soft, deliberate creak from the floorboards in the hallway. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. I told myself it was the house settling. Old homes made noise, didn't they? But then it came again, closer this time. Slow, measured steps, as if someone was pacing just outside my bedroom door. I sat up, my heart pounding. "Hello," I called, my voice shaking. Silence. Summoning my courage, I climbed out of bed and crept to the door. Pressing my ear against it, I listened, straining to catch any sound. The faintest shuffle, like fabric brushing against wood, sent a shiver down my spine. I slowly unlocked the door and pulled it open, the hallway yawning before me in eerie silence. No one was there. I checked every room in the house, my phone flashlight trembling in my hand. Living room, empty. Kitchen, empty. Even the closets were bare. By the time I returned to my room, I felt foolish. My imagination was running wild. I locked the bedroom door again, double-checked the windows, and climbed back into bed. But I couldn't sleep. The oppressive silence was broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves outside. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, when a soft tap-tap-tap broke through the quiet. It was coming from the window. I turned my head, my blood running cold. The curtains were drawn, but I could see the faintest shadow behind the fabric. Someone was outside. I bolted upright, grabbing my phone, and dialed 911 with shaking hands. The operator assured me that officers were on their way. I stayed frozen in bed, my eyes glued to the window. The shadow didn't move, but the tapping continued, slow, deliberate, as if whoever was out there wanted me to look. The minutes stretched into an eternity before I heard the sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway. across the dark, empty night. I slammed the door shut, panic clawing at my chest. I called 911 again, but the line went dead after a single ring. The tapping resumed, louder this time. I turned back toward the window, my legs trembling. I didn't want to look, but something compelled me to. Slowly, I crept toward the curtains and pulled them aside. The window was empty. The tapping, however, hadn't stopped. I realized then that it wasn't coming from the window. It was coming from inside the house, from the closet. I've stayed in dozens of Airbnbs, quirky apartments, cozy cabins, even a converted lighthouse once. But this house felt different from the moment I stepped inside. It was an old Victorian tucked away on a quiet suburban street, the kind of place that looked picturesque in photos, but somehow colder in person. The listing promised a spacious, private retreat, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it had been empty for too long. Dust clung to the banister, and the faint smell of damp lingered in the air. Still, I needed a place for the night, and the price was unbeatable. The house had its quirks, like most old places. The floors creaked with every step. The lights flickered occasionally, and the air felt heavy, almost oppressive. I brushed it off as my imagination, chalking it up to the late hour and my exhaustion from traveling. I unpacked quickly and decided to explore a bit before settling in. The living room was cozy enough, with an old fireplace and mismatched furniture. The kitchen, though small, was well equipped. As I wandered down the narrow hallway, I noticed a door at the very end. It was plain, painted a dull gray, and slightly ajar. I assumed it led to a closet or a laundry room. Curious, I nudged it open and was surprised to find a narrow staircase leading down. The listing hadn't mentioned a basement. I flipped the switch on the wall, but the bulb at the bottom flickered and died, leaving the staircase bathed in darkness. Something about the sight made my stomach turn. I decided to leave it alone. Whatever was down there, it could wait until morning. I locked the door and headed upstairs to the bedroom. The night passed uneventfully, at first. I fell asleep quickly, lulled by the sound of rain tapping against the window. But sometime in the middle of the night, I woke with a start. I didn't know what had stirred me at first, but then I heard it. A faint sound like footsteps coming from below. I froze, straining to listen. The sound wasn't constant, just the occasional creak, followed by a soft, almost imperceptible thud. I told myself it was nothing. Old houses make noise, don't they? But then came the scraping. It was faint, but unmistakable. The sound of something being dragged across the floor. It came from directly below me, the basement. I wanted to ignore it, to roll over and convince myself it was just my imagination. But as the sound continued, my unease grew. I had to know. Grabbing my phone for light, I crept downstairs. The house felt colder than before, the shadows deeper. The gray door at the end of the hall loomed ahead of me, its edges glowing faintly from the weak bulb at the top of the basement stairs. The door was open. I was certain I had locked it. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, but I couldn't stop myself. Slowly, I descended the stairs, each creak of the wood reverberating through the silence. At the bottom, the weak light barely illuminated the space. The basement was mostly empty, save for a few dusty boxes and a rusted metal chair in the corner. But then, I noticed the scratches. Deep, jagged gouges ran along the floor, as if something heavy had been dragged across it repeatedly. My pulse quickened as I followed the marks to the far wall. There, half hidden behind a pile of boxes, was another door. It was smaller, almost childlike in size, and made of heavy, splintered wood. scratches on the floor told me it had been opened recently. The air felt wrong, too cold, too still. My hand trembled as I reached for the door. Just as my fingers brushed the handle, a loud thump echoed behind me. I spun around, my phone's light darting across the room. Nothing. The silence was deafening now, pressing against my ears like a physical weight. And then, from behind the door, I heard it. A soft, rasping breath. I bolted. I ran up the stairs, slamming the basement door shut behind me. My hands shook as I fumbled with the lock. For the rest of the night, I sat in the living room. Every light in the house turned on, my phone clutched tightly in my hand. When the first light of dawn broke through the windows, I left without a second glance. I didn't care about getting my deposit back or explaining to the host why I'd left early. But as I drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched.